An archer sets his sights on an entire universe. Here's your relook at the Mattel DC Universe Classics Wave 9 Green Arrow. Oliver Queen is the Green Arrow, a vigilante who uses his bow and arrow to fight crime at a street level while espousing socially liberal values. Before we get a second look at this figure, having looked at him before, the first thing we're going to do is take the trusty tape measure of mine. I'm going to take it right to the very top of his hat. Now, the hat is not removable, by the way, FYI. I'm sure I would have told you that during the course of this review anyways. But stopping it right to the very top of his hat, regurgitating it to you, members of the mob, you're looking at the figure of Green Arrow standing 6.6 inches in height. I went for a dramatic pause there. 16.8, converting that over to centimeters, is how tall Green Arrow stands if you like your figures in at least centimeters. If you also dig your figure reviews with a little bit of comparisons, there is Batman, also from the DC Universe line. You can see that they pretty much share the exact same body, though they've tweaked slightly the tooling for the mold on Green Arrow. The Archer's body is a little bit different, of course, because he's sporting that tunic. How about some comparisons to some stuff that's out, of course, now? And for that, we'll bring in the Batman, the go-to, it seems, when it comes to comparisons of the older figures of yesteryear with the stuff that's coming out nowadays. It does stand out, yes, as a sore thumb. You could no way, in any shape, way, or form, pull the Green Arrow from your lineup and mix it up with Batman from the new line of DC Multiverse, because it does stand out like a sore thumb. These older figures, yes, while they do share the same bodies and same heights, the Green Arrow, unfortunately, could not be paired with Batman simply just because they look like two different lines, which exactly is what they are. Maybe down the road, time will tell. Todd McFarlane may give us the Green Archer as a DC Multiverse line, but in the meantime, we'll just bring in the Batman so yes, you can see. You can't really quite put the figures together as they stand out like a very sore thumb. And having dealt with sore thumbsies in my days, primarily from the days of playing video games, I can tell you, sore thumbs do stand out. I mean, they always seem a little bit bigger, and you move them a little less. Oh, that's sore thumbs. Anyways. Judging by the number of comments that I received from you, the viewing audience, as to whether I could go back and re-review a lot of my DC Universe figures, apparently there is a market for you guys. And being that I've gotten that itch a bit, don't worry, I'm going to get some medication for that, to have a look at some of these older figures that would have covered my collecting shelves back in the days. More than happy to incline to go back and, like I said, have a look at these figures again. We're going to look at the accessories. I sort of been dangling in front of the camera, teasing you guys. He does come included with the arrow and the bow attached together, one and the same. Unfortunately, with this one figure, the one accessory that I don't also have included for this figure at the time of this re-review is the piece, the Collect and Connect piece for Chemo. I've already built that figure. I've already put him together. I've already enjoyed and found pleasure in having that figure on my display, and then ultimately sold it. What a big mistake that was. I would love to get that Chemo back in my collection. So unfortunately, no Collect and Connect pieces anywhere in sight for this particular review. But in the meantime, let me treat you to a joined arrow and bow. Joined not quite at the hip, but certainly joined in the center section there. You've got, let me just move arrow out of the way. I always feel like, there we go. Can't quite get a closer look at these accessories sometimes because the camera is thinking, oh, you want to look at the figure. Oh, you want to look at the figure. We're going to look at the figure a little bit later, Mr. Camera. It's not actually what I call it. The bow and the arrow are attached just in the dead middle of it. It's actually molded together, so if you pried this away, you would be very disappointed because not only would you break the arrow, but you probably would most definitely break the string, in this case plastic, attached to the back of the arrow, of the bow, I should say. It's all done in green plastic, slightly darker green in the middle section here, and as I said, the arrow is permanently affixed, sort of gooped in place. I guess it's not so much, it was probably just molded that way, but for some reason they just gooped, well, obviously, they're having to paint this. Somebody with very tiny hands and an even smaller paintbrush would have to have painted all of this, and the trade-off, obviously, is there's a little bit of paint on the arrow. I'm not going to find fault with that, that's ridiculous. But the bow and the arrow collectively do fit into his hands. Kind of clever the way that they've done that. And then he also comes with a bunch of other arrows. Now the other arrows sort of now serve as being useless. That's not 100. That's not fair. That's not 100% true. What I will say, though, is you can take the bow, you can pry the finger sort of away from the palm, and if you can get it, you get that, there we go, you get that bow sitting right inside. You can then take the backhand, which has a slightly different configuration of fingers, at least it forms a bit of a gap there on the back. You can then take, let me just get that pose there, you can then take the hand, and you can actually make it look like he's drawing back the bow, at least pulling it from the arrow. I like that. That's a nice touch. I know I was going to really say that it serves useless to now include all these extra arrows. Technically, you could still display the figure by having the bow in one of his hands and then having the arrow in his other hand. Yeah, it does make really no sense why he would be holding an arrow, and yet he already has one already prepped, loaded, and ready to be fired on the bow, but it's neither here nor there. As I said, though, he does come with some other cool-looking arrows. We'll put the figure down here for a second. I mean, I really would have loved if this figure could have had the potential to remove that arrow, but I know that's not even possible. The only other way to compromise is they certainly could have just left the bow without the arrow and then simply just had all the arrows as extra pieces. But then the downside, though, is you could have the string of the arrow of the bow breaking because there's nothing really keeping that together. It would just be a very thin bit of plastic. And you can never really, I mean, truth be told, you can never really get the arrow perfectly lined up on the bow. It always kind of looks like it wants to be falling away from it. It always just looks ridiculous. Anyways, let's have a look at the other arrows that come included with one green arrow. We'll have a look at those right now. I guess he comes with a more traditional arrow until you look closely at it and you see there's a countdown timer. Let's see if I can show you guys there. There we go. A little countdown timer. Apparently it's set for zeros right now, so everybody should probably duck and clear it, or perhaps he just hasn't set it yet. So we've got ourselves a detonating dart. That's kind of clever the way that they've done that. He does also come with one that has, it looks like a bolo snare. As you can see, there's 3 orbs done of silver, which I would imagine would probably project themselves out and probably either snare him as a wire or probably would eject out and form maybe possibly a net. But he does have 3 of those, at least 3 on the tops of the arrow point. Now, the arrows themselves, like the bottom of the arrows, aren't that much different from one another. Let me just go back and grab that one again so you guys can see. Really, if you look at them, the ends of the arrows are pretty much identical to one another. It's really only the heads of the arrows that do change. Well, we looked at detonating arrow, stay clear of that. We looked at bolo snare arrow, and then he also does have this arrow, which you could say possibly is like a gas arrow. They're nicely done, to be fair. I mean, even like the one that has the detonator, for how small that actually is, it's pretty impressive that Mattel would have actually even put 00 on there. I mean, instead of just sticking on some black paint and calling it a day. So he does have those, and then he also has this one. I really like this one a lot. This is the punching bag arrow. Punching bag is not removable, but you've got yourself a nice molded red punching punching glove on the end of it, with even right down to the fact that they've actually painted little silver laces on the end of it. That's a nice little touch. Small, and again, like if you look at all of these, they're really small things, very easy something that you could lose. Luckily, I haven't lost any of these yet. Now, I would think, I mean, if I was watching this guy reviewing this figure, you probably would be screaming to the camera right now. You shouldn't have to shout, I can hear you. You could probably take these arrows right, put them in the back of his quiver, couldn't you? No, you can't. If you look at the back of the figure, yes, he does have a quiver with several arrows, but they haven't given you any areas to actually then take the extra arrows and fit them inside. Why they left no gaps, no spaces whatsoever to accommodate these extra arrows still is something that baffles me. Why wouldn't they just include that? Because he can really only hold one of them at a time. I mean, if you fit the arrow in between his fingers, trying not to, of course, drop it, there you go. You can fit it in between his fingers, but it doesn't really, if he had other fingers open, I mean, there is a pinky finger that's separated from the, I guess that would be the ring finger. I guess in theory you could fit it in there, but certainly not as secure as in between the pointer finger and your middle finger right there. So again, you could display it there, but if you don't display it in this hand, and you certainly can't display it in this hand, then where are you going to display it? That's the question that will still be left unanswered. So while I do appreciate the fact that he does have the quiver, and it's nicely sculpted, unfortunately you can't do anything with those included arrows. That's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? Paint, for some strange reason, is darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. I guess they wanted to add a little bit of shadowing or shade to the bottom of it. Makes really no sense to me. Keep it all one color if you ask me. We'll go ahead and take the bow out of his hands. I feel like while I've been doing this and displaying him while I'm talking, I've been warping the end of the arrow because I had his hand too close. So sorry for that. So sorry for that. Gonna put that to the side and we're gonna have a look at Green Arrow, one of my favorite characters from the DC, not even multiverse or universe line, just one of my favorite DC heroes, period. I've always been a big fan of Oliver Queen, though I prefer this look myself. The hood, no, not so much. The longer beard, no, not so much. I prefer more like the Errol Flynn look with a curled beard at the bottom, the curled mustache, and of course the more traditional Robin Hood design. Always been a big fan of this one. Now he does have also this loop of plastic that runs. Ideally, this is supposed to be something that's attached to the back of the quiver. Now the quiver is permanently affixed. You can't remove this. You could break this off, sure. You could say I'm a liar and just peel this right off. But then you would break the peg and the way it's connected to the back, so don't do that. Does, like I said, have that strap of plastic running around the front. He has his collar, which just has a bit of depth to it. I like that the collar drapes in front of this strap, so it feels like you've got like a layered effect happening here. The tunic is done in a dark forest green with that lighter lime green on in the inside there, with no real additional shading to it. Going back though to his face, he does have some shading done to his cheeks, and that's really about it. The coloring on his hair is good, the coloring on his mask is good, and the area of his eyes that now pierce white is clean as well. I've had no issues with that. I keep playing with this, and I gotta keep telling myself to stop. This is a feather that sticks out the top of his hat, and it's made of a softer plastic. I know I'm going to just keep eventually doing this until it's going to break off, and then I'm going to be disappointed in myself that I didn't stop when I should have. He's got paint done on, of course, his arms. Flesh tone, but it seems like he's got this warm tone of color of pink that's been added to the back. He's got like a suntan only on the back of his arms. It's strange that it's not really anywhere else. Like on the front it's there, but only it's on the top. And like I said, it's more running from the back than anything else. This is sometimes what, a lot of times the problems with DC Universe figures. Random places of color will just be painted with no rhyme or reason. Like, I would be curious as to why he only has a sunburn on the back of his arm. I want to know the story behind that. And yet, it's a story, again, I'm never going to hear. Coloring on the green is nice, the coloring on the plastic. Now, this probably is all dark plastic that they used. And then they maybe painted the inside, because the inside does look like it's more a painted plastic surface. Well, probably this primary green color, the plastic, of course, that they molded. I feel like it's the exact same thing for his legs as well. Probably all of this figure was done in a dark green. And then just the areas like his flesh tones, the areas of the center area in the lime, and the color of his lime-colored pants are probably all things that they would have painted on in place. All right, down to his boots as well, that also share that same dark green plastic. He does have peg holes in the undersides of his feet. One of the ongoing problems I have with these Universe figures over the course of time, it's like I'm ringing the dinner bell. Dinner's ready, everybody. Dinner's ready. Unfortunately, yeah, his legs have gotten really loose. I'm trying to think of what I could actually do to fix this, short of maybe popping the legs off, which I don't, for the sake of doing it in this review, I don't want to do it right now, just in case I break it. But I think I probably could pop these legs off. I think there's two places that are probably loose. It's primarily this piece right here. So it's the way that the legs have been pegged into the lower torso. If I could just pop the leg off, maybe add like a little bit of floor polish or a little bit of nail polish, a tip of the trade, that you could thicken up the joint a bit so when you put it back in place, you're probably not going to be getting this. Dinner's ready, everybody. Dinner's ready. So yeah, it's a shame that one of my favorite figures of the Universe line has a bit of a loose legs. That's a bit of a shame. Joker has one of the worst for loose legs, and it's one of my favorite figures from the entire Universe line. Gonna have to definitely fix these. Anyways, for the articulation on this guy, his head rotates all the way around. It hinges up, it hinges down. Doesn't really have much of a rock back and forth. Again, I want to stress the fact that the hat isn't removable, so don't try prying that off, whatever you do. The arms hinge out, but not quite at a 90-degree angle, instead more like a 45-degree angle. And again, you can rotate those all the way around. He has a swivel on the bicep. Somebody had asked, why don't I simply show the full range of motion instead of just going back and forth? Well, for that individual, you can rotate the arms all the way around. You can bend the elbow just at that point. He only has a single hinge in the elbow, and you can rotate the hands all the way around with a hinge back and forth. Most of these Universe figures will also have the same crunch in the abs, the swivel in the waist, and then of course you've got the more calling card of the Universe line is that awkward split on the legs. It's fine and good to be splitting the legs, but of course it always leaves this open gap at the under area there. It looks, again, a bit strange the way that they've done that, but, you know, that's the stuff that it was back in the days. Swivel at the first quarter cut of the thigh, a single hinge on the knee, no articulation in the boots. What I am doing right now is simply just swiveling the cut on the thigh. And then he does have articulation in the feet, no rock back and forth. These figures back in the day didn't really have those. They did later on, but the earlier stuff, this stuff, for example, didn't have that. Still like Green Arrow. I'm saddened, unfortunately, by the fact that this particular figure, let me just get him dead center in middle frame. Unfortunately, this figure does have some loose problems with the legs, which is constant and ongoing issue. If you manage to pick up these figures and still have them sealed, you probably won't have that problem. But even just mild playing, just simply just moving the legs, I'm not going around playing with them in the woods anywhere. That would be a bit strange, wouldn't it? But simply just posing them the way that they are. Over time, they just develop these loose legs. It's not all the figures, but most, if not all the figures that I have, I probably would say at least 3/4 of them have developed the same issues with the looseness at the tops of the legs. Again, I'm going to probably try to see if I can fix this. Pop the legs off both sides and maybe add a little bit of additional bulk to those joints. Might maybe fix the joint system on these legs, because I really wouldn't want to part ways with Green Arrow. This particular Green Arrow is one of my favorite figures in my collection. Looking also at the DC Universe Green Arrow again has also reminded me painfully how I parted ways with Chemo. Chemo was one of my favorite Build-A-Figures that had come out in the entire DC Universe run, and yet for some reason again goes back to the idea of, do I really need to have this guy in my collection? I can free up space. Freeing up space is fine and good, not until of course you regret it later. So really think it carefully out before you decide to sell, give away, or trade your figures. You might find yourself in the same position as this guy is, regretting giving it up later on in life. Still, despite for the fact of losing out on Chemo, I'm going to definitely have to pick that guy up again, maybe on eBay. I don't know what the prices would be on a Chemo Build-A-Figure, probably expensive. I'm still glad I held on to Green Arrow. Green Arrow is one of my favorites of the DC Universe line. I would say within the top 10, he makes that list. He's got a nice design to it, sporting more classic attires. Green Arrow also, I believe, made a reappearance later on with a more updated attire, but no. Don't sway me away from it. I'm sticking with the classic design myself. I like that he does have the alternate arrows, though really you can't do any of them with the bow itself, because of course the bow already has the arrow in place. It does look a little awkward, yes, that you've got a floating arrow just sort of sitting on the bow right now in final looks, and unfortunately he doesn't have any available space in the quiver to hold those extra 4 arrows. Missed opportunity. Have you managed to pick up this figure? Did you actually have this figure in your collection? Let me know down below in the comments section. Again, I was asked a couple of times if I would consider going back and having a look at the DC Universe line, and I think when it was time to pick out sort of my first couple of figures that I would be looking at, I had to put Oliver Queen near the top of that list. Easily is one of my favorites. But let me know down below what you guys think of this, whether you have still had this guy in your collection. Maybe you did sell him and regret him like I've regretted many, many times of the figures I've gotten rid of. But let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of this figure. If you're also new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, turn on the bell notification, and stay tuned because there's going to be a lot of videos coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.